Okay, so thank you.
Sure.
Okay, thank you so much, sir.
Fine.
So,
Yeah.
our next speaker is.
Thanks, Ish. Yeah, go ahead.
No,
So I just
sir,
wanted to
sir,
thank you all
continue.
for
I'm so
arranging
sorry.
this.
Please
Yeah.
continue.
No, that's all. So thanks, Ishita and Madhav and all the others who have kind of arranged this event.
No
Thanks.
problem, sir. We'd love to have you again. Hopefully
Sure.
soon. Yeah.
Sure.
All right. So our next speaker is from the IEEE Robotics Automation Society. And can you guys please sign on? Gokul Raj and Chetan. This is going to be a
Yes.
panel style discussion. Yeah. So, guys, feel free to ask any questions you want in the middle. And they're going to be talking about the robot operating system and the revolution of Arduino and Raspberry Pi in robotics.
So, hey guys, I
Yeah.
hope you guys can hear me.
Yeah.
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay, so before starting this, first can everyone turn on your videos if it's not a problem? Just for a minute. Just want to see your faces and say hi as it's not an actual seminar. This is the best we can do offline. Hi, 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 hi. Yeah, so many happy faces. It's weekend, so yeah, and also Feb 14. Anyways, let's come to the content.
Yeah. Just give me 1 second. I'll turn on the presentation.
Sure, sure, sure. Okay. So it's really happy to see these many people who are interested to listen what we speak. And sir, it was a great session. We really enjoyed it. And after such an informative session about hardware and open source and stuff, let's go to a storytelling session. Now, what we both are going to do is kind of a storytelling. So, Chetan here, he will speak about how Arduino Raspberry Pi ever like revolutionized the robotic industry from a bar. I mean, yeah, technically. So, and I'll be speaking about the current trend of open source in robotics and how like robotics became an sorry open source became an essential component of robotics. So I guess Chetan, you can start right now. And guys, last but not least, I'm Gokul Raj. I'm the chair of IEEE RAS Robotics and Automation Society, PS University. So Chetan, you can start.
Yeah. So, hi everyone. I'm the treasurer of IEEE Robotics and Automation Society. My name is Chetan. So, first things first, I actually want to thank sir for that very insightful session. I'm actually looking forward to the workshop. We were
Oh, thank
actually
you.
talking to a few of my friends in the morning. I just remembered that I never registered. I came across the link and I forgot about it totally. So, when you mentioned that the registrations are still open, I can't wait to get started with that. So, yeah, coming to our presentation today. So, like we've all seen, open source software actually holds no bounds in terms of, the versatility and the.
Please
Uh,
do. You can go ahead and do that if you like.
yes, sir. I'll do it right after the session today. Yeah. So, yeah. So, like I was saying, open source software actually holds no bounds in
Uh,
terms of, the versatility and the sheer number of contributions available in the internet today. But if you think about it, why should open source be limited only to software, right? The principles of open design and public contribution, they can always be applied to any field where development takes place. And so obviously we arrive at this concept of open source hardware, which obviously includes stuff like FPGAs and your programmable logic devices, the PLDs. But then, when we have proprietary stuff everywhere, like any circuit you can imagine, like take my phone, for example, the smartphone PCB inside that, the motherboards in your laptop, or even something like a washing machine circuit, if you think of it, where it measures the weight of the clothes you have and automatically decides the water quantity and the cycle time. All these functions are in one or the other way proprietary. Hence, what even is the point of open source hardware and where do we even see it in action, you might ask? So before I get into the nitty gritty details of what open source hardware is and where we see it, I just have an interesting photo for you guys. So can anyone tell me what this is a picture of? So I'm sure we've all seen it in probably a different form before, but we have all obviously used this. So
Arduino.
yes, exactly. So this was the first ever Arduino board that was ever created. So uh, the Arduino revolution, as you might have all seen, has gone across many iterations and through many years. And we currently have lots of different boards available. So the Arduino prototyping platform is one of the most widely used in the world today. We regularly see it in our college, and obviously nowadays it's even going across to school curriculums. So when you talk about open source hardware, Arduino is the first thing that comes to everyone's mind. To give you guys a small sneak peek, into the origins of Arduino, if you ever wondered about that part. So, like Gokul mentioned, it has origin in Italy, out of all places. So, one of the founders, I don't recall the name exactly. So, he used to frequent this bar named Bar di Arduino, which was actually named after the king Arduin of Italy. So, Arduino is not really just a cool name. It does have its fair share of history and how the name came into its origins. So coming back to like the story, the students at this university that was visited by this founder, which is actually the Interaction Design Institute, which is present at Ivrea at Italy. So they used a microcontroller known as the Basic Stamp. So this was developed by a company called Parallax for their interactive design projects. And as the name suggests, this was coded using the basic programming language, and it had its own I/O ports, just like any other board. However, the main disadvantage with this board was that it had very limited power, and second was that it cost upwards of around $100. So, not to mention, it required quite a bit of technical know-how to operate. So, this exactly the left picture you see here is actually the basic stamp, and you might be wondering, this is just a microcontroller with pins on either side. How do you put your code into this? So we actually use devices called programmers back then. They're already being used even today. But then, uh, if you ask me how you would code into something like this, we have microcontrollers like these. So I just took an example here. This is the Atmega 16. So the size of this, you might have all observed, is very small. So it's about the size of my index finger. And this particular version, the Atmega 16, has around 40 pins. So that is how a basic microcontroller, the bare bones, looks like. But then you might be wondering, how do I even push code into something like this? This is just a block of a black box, you might call it. But then what we use for that concept is basically embedded C. So here is an AVR simulator, and if you actually see this, there is a lot of things happening. Even though the program that is what the program is doing right here is just turning an LED on and off. So we have a separate delay ms function, and we have to set the frequency of the CPU. We call in some libraries, and then we actually use bit manipulation for the DDRs, that is the data direction registers. So we perform bit manipulation uh, to actually control the pins available on the board, and thus you would be controlling the board itself. So, but when you see this microcontroller, you have the microcontroller, that is fine, and you have the code. But this does not have any USB port like the Arduino, where you can just push your code in, right? You might be wondering how that even takes place. So for that, we used to use something called as the programmer. So here is where you plug in your microcontroller, and the other IC you see here is not the IC you're controlling. This is actually the interface between your microcontroller and your USB port that pushes in the code from your laptop. So you had to put your microcontroller in, lock it up, and then you connect your USB cables and then push your code. So you can actually see these boards being implemented. Probably you could see them in Cori especially. So Cori at the FBlock basement, they have a lot of boards that work with this platform. So when you have all this complexity, do you think this would be suitable for a simple hackathon project, or perhaps a simple, a mini project that you're performing in college? This seems too tedious, right? So that was the whole point of Arduino and the problem it tried to solve. So here is a basic Arduino board, the one you've all seen, and this is just a basic the setup and the loop function that's going to do the LED turning on and off in just 4 lines. So this is where the beauty of Arduino definitely lies. You can just plug in your LED, connect your USB, type in the small piece of code, and you're actually done. So what this Arduino has essentially enabled us to do is rapid hardware prototyping. And you'd actually be surprised to know that even NASA uses Arduinos. So these Arduinos, along with XBs, which are popular communication modules, they were connected to this Iridium module that helps establish a satellite uplink, and they were shot up into space. So this was the actual implementation, and it was shot up into space, and these sensors actually helped beam data back to the Earth. So this was part of NASA's goal to use rapid hardware prototyping wherever possible, and that just shows the extent of the depth to which Arduino is being used in the wide world today. Oh, okay. So before I drift off again, let me just finish the story I began. So the prototyping board I showed you in the first, the original Arduino, the prototype, that was not really called the Arduino back then. The founders themselves, they were big believers in the open source concept and wanted to develop a quick and easily accessible platform. So they thought of keeping this project open source. And by the way, another sad reason was that the institute they were working in was soon going to shut down. So they didn't want this project to be, lost forever. At this very moment is when they decided to release this platform open source. But then, while open source software was a thing back then, open source hardware was actually relatively unheard of in the public domain. So they released this whole concept under a Creative Commons license, which is commonly used by the entertainment industry out of all things. So you might be wondering what the connection is between the entertainment industry and hardware, right? So this is how the founders defined it. So hardware is a piece of culture that must be shared with other people. Based on this concept, they went ahead to make the board. And since the whole theme was to help students build more easily, it was decided to fix the prices around $30. And one more interesting part about the Arduino you might have all seen is that PCBs are usually bright green in color, any PCB that you look at. But they wanted their board to stand out, and hence they opted for this more different looking blue color. This became such a huge success and became something iconic actually, bringing so many people into the world of electronic hobby projects, making the Arduino truly be recognized as a milestone in the hardware industry today. But then you might be wondering how Arduino simplified all these things. The concept of using a microcontroller, embedded C, and using a programmer to push in the code seemed very complex, right? How is the Arduino simplifying this actually? So to give you an analogy, this is similar to using a remote controlled car versus building it all by yourself. So Arduino still has a microcontroller. We usually call the whole board as a microcontroller. But the fact actually is the black IC you see here is actually the only microcontroller, and everything else is just extensions. And that's how the board actually comes to be. But then one more point you might ask is that there was a separate device called the programmer there to actually push in the code. How does the Arduino actually do that all by itself? For that, you can see the small microcontroller here near the TX and RX, the lights there, the LEDs. This is a small microcontroller that actually helps you interface your USB connection to the microcontroller. So the Arduino is basically like a all-in-one built-in platform. And obviously, this is the Atmega 328P, which I'm not going to go into detail now. So all this history is fine, and you might again ask me how exactly is this open source hardware. So coming to that, if you talk about software, what do you call open source? You call things that are like the code that is publicly available in the public domain, right? So how would that be equivalent in terms of hardware? When you talk in terms of hardware, you can have the schematics, the circuit diagrams, and the connection pinouts. So these are all publicly available. So this is exactly the schematic for how the Arduino board is, connected internally. And if you can actually build the circuit, you have a working Arduino with yourself. So you can just go buy the microcontroller, the Atmega, and then you print a PCB. You get all these components, plug them in. You have an Arduino for yourself. And this is totally allowed. This is not illegal, or you're not copying anything, because Arduino is open source. Anyone can build it. And it is actually kind of fun too if you take up a project like this. So imagine your friends using an Arduino when you can actually say, I built an Arduino. So that is the specialty of open source hardware. You can learn and replicate the design, you can make modifications, you can share your findings with the public community. All this helps you gain greater insight and fosters a very interactive environment where everyone's willing to take part in learning to build circuits. So if you have a wide scale project to work on, uh, probably something like a startup with a working product, you can use all these open source resources to actually build a system specific to your needs, thus making them fully customizable as per your project. You would not be able to do this if this whole project was proprietary. So speaking of building, there are countless projects that have been made with the Arduino Uno. So while I think we all started, working with the Arduino with the inbuilt LED. You turn it on, the pin 13, the LED blinks. But then, like I showed you, the NASA project, there are many projects as such that have unimaginable amount of complexity. So here is one really interesting project I would like you all to see. So let me just play this video. I hope it's streaming. Is it not streaming?
Yeah, it's showing up now.
Yeah. So what you just saw is called the useless machine, and it's built completely using an Arduino and a switch and a few motors. So while definitely it is useless, it brings out the whole concept of having open source. Imagine working in a top level electronics company, and then you claim funds for a project, and this is what you come up with. So I don't really know what would happen if that took place. But since the Arduino is open source, you can actually let your creativity run wild, just like this guy, and then you can actually share your findings with the world to see. So maybe someone even comes up with an even more useless machine, who knows? But the effort that is put into making this is a step forward in itself, because you're actually thinking in different creative ways to make new stuff. So like, enough about the Arduino itself. But when I talk about Arduino, there's obviously everything. There's obviously one more thing that everyone mentions when I talk about Arduino, or projects, hobbies, stuff like that. Can anyone tell me what that is? It is pretty obvious. The only other well-known platform apart from the Arduino itself. Uh, Someone would unmute or probably use the chat. Yes, it is the Pi. So obviously, yeah, I'm talking about the Raspberry Pi itself. But one important question we might have is the Raspberry Pi open source hardware? So contrary to popular opinion, it is not. So the Arduino was originally designed in Italy, but since the design itself is open source, most of the boards we use today don't actually arrive from Italy. There are hundreds and thousands of people around the world, companies which make Arduino boards. However, with Raspberry Pi, this is not the case. So though the platform used, that is the OS, which is Raspbian, is open source. However, some of the hardware descriptions of the components used in the Pi are not available in the public domain. So you cannot manufacture a Pi yourself. All the Pi boards that are manufactured in the world are only through the Raspberry Pi Foundation, which is a non-profit based in the United Kingdom. So they develop the board themselves and manufacture it. And in fact, the foundation proudly claims that there is no fake Pi available in the world, because to manufacture it at a competing price is not at all possible since they do it millions at a time. So even though the Pi is widely thought to be open source, it is sadly not completely an open source product. And that exactly brings me to the second interesting part of my talk, which is on the newly released Raspberry Pi Pico. So this is very, very recent news. The Pico was launched, I think, less than a month ago, if I'm not wrong, and it has surely received lots of media coverage. Why, you might ask? Well, first of all, Apple released their new M1 chips a little while back. You might all be knowing about that. And so, in the word of the Raspberry Pi team themselves, they say it's almost like every fruit company is making their own silicon. So it's right time for us to do that as well, and hence they have the Raspberry Pi Pico, which is actually a direct competitor to Arduino, or more specifically, a new addition to the world of microcontrollers. I don't really want to call it a direct competitor to Arduino, which I will elaborate in a little while. So another important reason why this is given so much media coverage is because it runs on MicroPython. So, given PS University's love for Python right from the first semester, this is a very great thing because MicroPython is a stripped down version of Python, obviously, designed for microcontrollers. And as we all know, Python enables us to implement a lot more functionality with a lot less overhead. Hence, this is the perfect entry point to the world of microcontrollers for anyone who's going to be beginning soon. Again, you might ask me why this thing is such a big deal. So it is because the Pi Pico is completely open source, unlike the regular Raspberry Pis you see. So it runs on the RP2040 microcontrollers, that is the black chip you see here, that has actually been very well documented. And true to the spirit of open source, all the schematics, the designs have been made publicly available by the foundation for the first time, hence making this whole board count as open source hardware. And the one manufactured directly by the foundation costs just 300 rupees. It's already available everywhere in Bangalore right now, which is a great place for the next generation of students to start their journey with hardware. So though they were very restrictive about the original Pi models, this one they've actually encouraged third parties to come up with spin-offs. There are a lot of open source microcontroller boards that have been built based on this Pico design today, including by companies such as Adafruit and SparkFun, if you've heard of them. But something that's more surprising is that even Arduino has a board built based on this platform today. So they call this the Arduino Nano RP2040 Connect, and it's obviously using the RP2040 microcontroller here. This is just a computer generated image. And one interesting thing is that this board is actually more powerful than the Pico itself. This one includes Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, and microphone support. So here is another perfect example where you can see how open source brings in competitiveness between companies while also sharing resources, findings, and so like I mentioned earlier, nurturing innovation and technological progress, if you get what I mean. So one more thing I'd like to mention is that Arduinos, as we all know, are not really load intensive. They're used for simple tasks, things you can run in perhaps an if statement or a loop. So the Pico in itself runs on dual cores, and as claimed by the chip manufacturer, this will be able to run machine learning models. So you could probably use a sound sensor or an accelerometer, or probably use image recognition and run models right on the board, which would be impossible if you consider the Arduino deploying an ML model and working based on that. So the Pico is actually a very huge step ahead for the microcontroller community. I actually can't wait to get my hands on a Pico, which I should probably be doing by tomorrow. So just to stress on my point of creativity running wild even further, here is a portable gaming system that's built by this company called Pimoroni, and this is actually based on the Pico itself. So the board has been out for less than a month, and we already have such creative projects coming out. So staying true to the theme of open source, the company has enabled users to create their own games in Python. We all know how you can make games, simple games using Python, and you can directly load it from a USB cable into your Pico that is built inside the gaming system here. So they have dozens of such devices planned, and it's only a matter of time before even more ones crop up by various different people, individuals, or probably businesses. So thus getting the hardware community back on track after the pandemic, which actually brought down hardware hobby projects by a bit. So all in all, we saw that open sourcing of hardware actually provides developer access, or if we speak in terms of hardware, it is called builder access to a huge community. So it's way beyond any team of engineers working just for one company. It encourages collaboration and mutual progress. And in terms of this presentation, I actually did go into the depths of open source hardware definitions and such because I wanted this to be more of a brief introduction to anyone who would have come across and used these platforms, but wouldn't have wondered why everyone calls the Arduino a big deal. So I hope you got a little insight into that aspect today. So now I'd actually want to call upon Gokul Raj, who is the current chairperson of IEEE RAS, to give us more insight into this bridge between open source hardware and software. That is through robotic operating systems, ROS, and also how IEEE as an organization is encouraging more strides in open source. So thank you for listening, everyone. I hope that was fun and informative. Also, sorry for the presentation. It's really badly formatted. I just made it today morning. So over to you, Gokul.
Okay, so hey guys, can you hear me?
Yes,
Hey,
we can
yes,
hear
you're
you.
Okay, fine. So come on, guys, one more time. Turn on the camera, no? Let's have a quick discussion and then we'll start with the session. And you can unmute and speak, doesn't matter. So, how many of you are hungry here? Because I'm damn hungry right now. Yeah, right? So, it's been a long session, but yeah, fine for open source. Okay. So, let's start the session right now, and I will end it like in maximum 10 to 15 minutes. And then it won't go much also. And I have a fancy PPT like what Chetan did and all. I'll just speak. It's a storytelling. So, let's see what robot operating system did, what computer vision did, and also what's IEEE doing in open source. And let's wind it up. So, how many of you here are really interested about robotics? Now, I'm not gonna read the chat. I'm not gonna text the chat or see. Just unmute and say hi or whatever.
Yes, we are interested.
Okay, because like, dude, if it's offline, we can see people, we can interact. It'll be really good. Online, this is the best we can do. At least can speak. So, fine. Uh, okay, Chetan, stop pressing. Yeah, Chetan, it's fine. You can lower your hands.
You
Okay.
wanted the presentation to be on. It's fine, right?
No, 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 no.
Yeah, okay.
It's fine. So let's start with it, okay? So how many of you here know what is ROS or
Me.
OS? Okay, so can you say what is ROS?
It's basically a platform where you develop simulations for your robotic models using different packages. Like it's basically a collection of all those packages.
Okay, actually you raised your hand.
So it's basically a framework or a operating system based where we can develop and implement in real life too.
Okay, nice. Any other?
I had a question. So is it
Mhm.
is it like actually like an operating system, as in it has its own
No,
kernel or something like that?
no,
Okay.
no, no, no. Okay, fine. Now I will explain what is ROS. ROS is robot operating system, but as it suggests, it's not an operating system. It's based on Linux, and you can also download ROS for Windows and Mac, but it's experimental. It does not stable. So basically, before saying what is ROS and why it is needed, I will start with the basic story. So let's say you want to build a car. Don't say engine or all. Like, what are the major things you need? Okay. So let's say you want to build a bike. Again, what do you need?
Lesser wheels.
Okay. So so the wheels is the same thing in both the products, right? So imagine I'm making a car today. So suddenly I came up with something like, okay, this circle, this wheels. I mean, in the old days, that's what they did, right? There was a rock which was going there, like, oh, nice, it's going. So let me make it as a transport. They invented wheel. Now, for the car, I use the wheel. I'm like, okay, fine, four wheels are there, it's going. Fine. Now, if I want to make something bike, I don't want to reinvent the wheels. I can use the same thing which is used for the car, right? I don't want to start from the very beginning. But in robotics, this wasn't the case at the beginning. Imagine I wanted to make a RC car. Start from the basic, let's not say RC car. Let's say a mobile robot, like with wheels, of course, same as a car, which moves around. So first he has to come up with a basic chassis, wheels, everything. He have to create a drivers which will drive the motors. He has to create a microcontroller, a microprocessor, blah blah blah, everything to make it a robot. Now again, let's say one more guy is doing a vacuum cleaner robot. So what is the base again? It's a different type of mobile robot. That's it, right? Same wheels, microcontroller, microprocessor, drivers, everything. But now it is so easy. But before, let's say 2000, before 2000 and all, what people did is, imagine I'm in company A and you are in company B. I want to build a self like vacuum cleaner, you want to build a vacuum cleaner. We all start from the very scratch, and by the time we reach a basic layout, it will be like, like let's say 5 months or something. And in the 5 months you won't be doing anything new. You will be doing what other people did already, and then after that for a month or two you'll work on something new. So this was a problem at the beginning, called as reinventing the wheel, doing the same thing again and again and again, wasting so much of time. So this problem was faced by so many robotic engineers, and the two people named Keenan and Eric. They wanted to solve this problem. They are like, "Hey, what is this? Always doing the same thing again and again." They like showed a proposal where universities like Carnegie Mellon, if you know Carnegie Mellon, it's the world's best university for robotics, and like companies like Samsung, Toyota, Sony, whatever. All these people are spending, let's say a project is 100%, 80% of the time to reinvent things, and just 20% of the time to invent new things, to like add-ons. So they thought, let's just leave this traditional method. Let's start something new. And these people are studying in Stanford. Yes, so many great things happening in Stanford, Oxford. That's why we are like, oh my god, Stanford. So fine. So they started with some framework. They are like, okay, we should create something which will act as building blocks for the robots. If I create something, the next person don't have to create it. He can use it to create something more. So let's have that mindset. Why should we be closed? Let's be open. So they started with some framework like that. Then again, they are like, okay, how to do this framework? Like let's say I want to build a robot which is self-driving. How will I build that using my framework? Okay, what are the things which is needed for a self-driving car? It should have a camera to detect what is in the front, of course, or else it will hit a thing. It will have a lidar, it will have motors, drivers, again. So this framework, what it should do is, it will ask, okay, camera, to whom you are giving input. So camera will be like, I have to speak to the motor driver now. Then it will take the data, it will give it to the motor driver. Now it will ask the lidar to whom you have to speak. The lidar will say to that particular microprocessor. So it will get the input and give it to that microprocessor. So it's this particular model. I will ask what to whom I should send it to you. I will send it to him. I will get it from him. I will send it to you. End-to-end connection. So this is the model of ROS. So let's say you're doing a big project with n number of items. So all this n number of items can communicate with each other at the same time. Like for example, like one sensor can send data to 10 multiple devices at the same time without any delay. That's the biggest advantage of ROS. So these guys had this idea. So now traditional like social network movie, they had an idea, they started developing it, they proposed it in college, and just a second, um, I want to know that particular program. Okay, fine. First, when they proposed, they said two main points, like too much time dedicated for re-implementing the software infrastructure which is already created. Too much time dedicated to actually build. Too little time has been dedicated to actually building intelligent robotic program. Instead of finding something new, we are comfortable with doing the same thing which others did. So we are like, I'm doing it, and you're still doing it. You're just wasting your time. So in 2006, they started this framework. They're working on this framework, and they created a program called a Stanford Personal Robotics Program. It's the PR robot. Because let's say I have an idea. If I just say I have an idea, they're like, hey, what is this? You just have an idea. Everyone has it. So you have to show a proof, right? You have to show a working model. So they are thought like, okay, let's implement this particular idea in a robot called as PR robot, which is nothing but personal robot. So they started working on that. And I mean, let's say I have an idea right now. It doesn't mean like only I have that idea. The world is so big. Maybe some other person also has the same idea at some other point of time. So similarly, on that particular time also, there were big players at the time, like called as player stage, which is also a simulation tool for the robots which focus on this particular problem. Then there is something called as URBI, and even Sony, like of course we all know Sony, right? Walkman, and yeah, so many other devices. Even Sony had their own platform called as OpenR, which is a robotic simulation software, which is a software which is used for building robots. So How many of you heard of Aibo robots, the cute robot dog Sony made?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. It
expensive
was
one.
like
You
pretty
can
popular back in the day.
exactly. So even this guy, what's his name? Unbox some channel. I forgot the name.
Unbox
That guy
therapy.
did an unboxing video. Yeah, he did a video on Aibo dog. So in 1999 itself, Sony released iteration of Aibo dog that used an open R platform. But Sony thought like, okay, fine. Why should we develop something like this? I mean, it's not much use, and they stopped it. But if they continued, they will be in top, and Ross won't be in top, I guess, because of their products. Then they stopped it. But ironically, the recent Aibo robot which they released, the expensive one, uses ROS for its operations. So, okay, why we went there? Okay, fine. To say about the products which are already existing. But there is one major problem in all these things. None of this is open source. But yeah, URBI was open source, but it was not free. But more than it's not free, there's one more reason why ROS succeeded all these things, which I will say a little later. Now, as we all do, right? You have an idea, you start working on the college, but you can't commercialize it because the funds given by the college is not enough, right? Always we need a external funding. So they went on search for funding, and they spoke to this particular guy called as Scott in the Willow Garage. Now, Willow Garage is an organization which does research and development on robotics field. Now, that guy was like, oh, okay, cool. This is really cool. Let me invest in it. So he invested $50,000 and 50,000 to 75. Okay, I'm weak in math. You can calculate yourself. So he pitched that much amount, and they're so happy with it. They started working on ROS. Then they also started working on PR2. That is the second version of their robot with the new funding. Now, while they're working, they realize, okay, this is some mind-blowing idea. Let's invest more. Then the Willow Garage, that particular R&D center, which took this particular project, stopped all its own project. They are like, okay, we'll stop all the research project going on. Let's only focus on ROS. Then they started developing packages and things for ROS, and that was their only project. Then after that, people from Stage Player, as I said, right, the similar platform, everyone started working on Willow Garage for ROS, and then ROS was developed. Then it was open source, it had its boom. Everyone are like, oh my god, ROS. Because imagine I am in a company A and I'm working on a self-driving car. So they have their own software platform, everything. Now if I want to join a company B, then again I can start working from immediately. I have to learn the software which that company created for their self-driving car. So that was very bad. But ROS changed the entire game. They are like, we are open source. If you want, use us, create your packages, do whatever you want. As it's a framework, everyone were comfortable with it. I mean, everyone were getting comfortable with it. Even though a guy goes from company A to B, he don't want to start from the beginning. He have to see how that package works in ROS. He have to just know that knowledge and start developing it. So then what happened? Willow Garage also stopped developing ROS. They are like, after a point, uh, a new company arose called as Open Robotics. So this is an open source robotics company which is developing even now, which is working on ROS. So they are responsible for Gazebo, ROS, Orvis, Move It. All these are part of ROS. So all these softwares are developed by the open source robotics company. The company name only Open Robotics. So this is led by a guy called Jean Christophe Bailey. So the thing is, no software could compete with ROS. Everything lost. Because as I said, why URBI lost? Can anyone think of a reason why other companies can't stand before ROS, even though they are found before ROS?
They were not open source.
I mean, URBI was open source. It was like cross-platform open source only.
Maybe the community wasn't strong enough around it.
Yes, that's the major point. So even though URBI was little costly, people used it. But the thing is, let's say it's costly, so very less people used it. So they had very less community support. For ROS, is it's open source free. There's a hell lot of community support. So many people are like, okay, fine, I will contribute to ROS. I'll contribute to ROS. If you see, recently Toyota has donated some millions for as a charity fund for open robotics for the development in ROS, because all these companies use ROS, even Google, Microsoft, Amazon, all these people use ROS right now. And if you don't know ROS, like even like in 2 3 years or something, if you want to be a robotic engineer, I'm really sorry, you have to start learning ROS, because mostly by 2000 sorry by 2025, around 50% of robotic companies will be using ROS only. Others will have their own framework, of course, but yeah, it always happens, right? So that's the major thing in open source, right? You need a very good community support, and also so many people should be interested, and also it should be a win-win situation. I'm developing something and also I should get benefited. So that's what Ross created, that's why Ross succeeded. Now let's speak about OpenCV, and don't worry guys, I'll complete this in 5 more minutes, so we can all go out and have lunch, and also you can go follow your plans. Now OpenCV, how many of you worked with OpenCV?
I
I
have
had one long ago.
So do you know what's the expansion of OpenCV?
open source computer vision.
Exactly. So as the name suggests, it's an open source computer vision library. But you know one unique thing about OpenCV, like why OpenCV is the successor of all other things? Any guess? Okay, fine. The thing is because OpenCV has no competitors only. OpenCV is the only one in its domain. So in 1999, OpenCV was a research project in Intel. Then they proposed some conference papers in 2000. From 2000 to 2005, they released 5 iterations of computer vision library. Their aim is not just release something open source. So they wanted to give an optimized code for basic vision infrastructure also, instead of reinventing the wheel. They want to give it like, okay, if you want to do face recognition, 4 commands, these are 4 process, combine it, club it, do it, done. So they don't want to start from very basic mathematics, do kernels. No, they want to give it something straightforward, and that's why OpenCV was a big success, and no one could beat it. No one could also race to it. So so many startups to Google, Microsoft, Amazon, Intel, Toyota, all these companies, ClearPath, Boston Dynamics, all these companies use OpenCV only. It has no successor, no competitor also, of course. So then now let's come to the main part. I mean, it's not the main part, but which I want to stress about. So there is something called as IEEE. So imagine, I guess you all are interested in open source. That's why you are attending the meet, of course. So after, from all these people who attended, you guys are still there. That means you are really interested to do it. But when we are giving it something for free, generally people will be like, maybe that is not in good quality or something, right? Imagine there are 2 shops. In one shop is giving okay, let's take iPhone only, right? So even though we know some phones are really good, better than iPhones, why iPhone has its brand value?
Security.
Okay, fine. That's one good point. The thing is, from the way, if you see Jobs movie, you will understand from the very beginning it maintained its brand. It is like, I'm this brand. I'm setting the limit. I'm not going down. Whatever happens, even though if I lose, doesn't matter. I won't come down from my standards. So, but in open source, there's nothing like that, right? Anyone can apply. Anyone can do anything. I'm not saying that is bad. That is really good. Everyone should apply for open source. I mean, should work on open source projects and contribute, but there should be little standards for it to for the open source to reach next level. That's what IEEE SA is doing. You can register for it. You can be part of any chapter. IEEE PES, like PS in the sense power electronics, or IEEE RAS, or normal IEEE, or IEEE Computer Society, whatever chapter you are the part of. You can register to IEEE SA. There you can see like so many projects which are hosted on GitLab. You can choose anything, you can work on it, or you can propose your own project and you can work on it. So when you work on IEEE SA, you will have one standard you know uh, format. So that is like, it will give your project the trust and authenticity of IEEE, and you can experience an open, flexible development environment. And you can see so many people, as you know, IEEE is a strong field in technical domain in the entire world, and there are so many mentors over there who can guide you in it, and who can help you throughout your process. And also, if it's a really mind-breaking project, a mind-blowing project or something, and if they think it is, they'll help you to reach the industry experts as well, so that it can be incubated. So you can check out IEEE SA in the Google. Just type IEEE SA open source, so you will find it out. Now I will end this with just summary or something. In the field of robotics, there existed a relatively large void in terms of availability of adequate hardware. Okay, this is not my field. I'm just saying, speaking it. As mentioned before 2000s and all, robotics was a hard field because, as I said, everyone want to start from very basics. But now it's not the case. We have everything open source, so many open source blogs available, Instruct, Medium, and so many YouTube channels you can refer to. All these are open source only, right? It's not like it fits in GitHub, then only it's open source. Whatever course you're finding online, which you can use without any license, it's open source. So there are so many things online, so you can just learn from it and start building from it. Even from IEEE RAS, we will be starting 3 different events, in which one thing is called as random robotics, which we will be releasing in real soon, like in 2-3 days, where you can propose your idea. We will mentor you, will give you hardware, and we will make sure you complete that project, and we will add it to and when we will make all the codes and everything, the documentation, everything open source. So that we came up with right now, which we will be releasing. You will know about this real soon. So even in robotics, if open source revolution was not there, I don't think that the improvements happen now would have done, because was a real game changer. From delivery robots, which are working right now in US, to some military defense robots, from humanoids, from Boston Dynamics robots, everything uses ROS only. So again, so ROS, like robotics and open source, are like inseparable right now. So if there's no open source, I will confidently say the robotic growth will decline over 90% right now. So with that, I will end it. So thank you for this opportunity, guys. It was a really good experience speaking with you, and yeah, we are done.
Thank you so much, Gokul, Raj, and Chetan. Your talk was very informative, and I really feel like I learned a lot about, the importance of open source in robotics. Also, so we will be ending the meetup now. To our attendees, thank you so much for attending. I'm sorry we ran a little long, but I'm sure you guys learned a lot, right? Also, if you aren't a member of Best Open Source and you would like to join or have any questions about the joining process or anything, Kunal is going to put the link of our website, so feel free to visit it. We're also going to be sending you a feedback form in the chat, so please leave your comments. Thank you so much.
And guys,
also,
come, let's take a group picture. Like, turn on your camera, I'll take a screenshot. Simple as that.
Sure.
also feel
winding up the
free
meet.
to plug in IEEE RAS's social media or website or whatever, so those interested can join as well.
It's fine, Dakshay, Satvik, don't be shy. You can turn on your video, doesn't matter. Okay, fine. So that's it then. Let's wind up the meeting, and that's it from the IEEE. Really, really thanks for attending it, and bye.
Thanks a lot for having us.
Thank you.
Yeah. Bye.
Okay, I shall end the meeting now. Bye.
Bye.